Greetings builders! The next PoE League is coming on March 29th, and since we still have a few weeks left on the Affliction League, it's time for the traditional top 12 builds video. This video covers the 12 builds that I had the most fun playing during this amazing league, and it will be divided in 4 parts, so stay tuned to check them all before we start preparing for the Necropolis League. And of course, don't forget to share your own list in the comments and leave a thumbs up to support the channel. Thank you very much, and let's get into it! The first build to make the list, on 12th place, is the Hex Blast Mind Saboteur with the Shadow class. Hex Blast is a very interesting skill that deals a lot of extra damage if the enemy it hits is already cursed. Besides that, it also creates a big pulse of damage that destroys all nearby monsters. That's why it's important that our enemies are always cursed. To list the pros of this build, I would start with how powerful it gets with low investment. With cheap and easy to find items, we're going to make bosses disappear with your mind chain reactions. Part of that is because Hex Blast can naturally shock, freeze and ignite enemies, and if that wasn't good enough, it also considers the lowest resistance the enemy has before calculating the damage. This build is also very fast and deals a lot of area damage. It's super satisfying to clear maps this way. Above all, you can throw your mines from a long distance and stay far from danger. Now to list the cons, I will start saying that mine gameplay isn't for everyone. Some players just can't get used to the detonation mechanic, but trust me, it's worth giving a try because mine builds have huge potential. Another issue is that this character is not very tanky. Because of that, you need to always mind your position or you might die. As for budget, this build is cheap. You can get it destroying early endgame maps with only around 70 chaos. To comfortable advance to yellow maps, I recommend investing around 150 chaos, and for easily completing your atlas, I recommend investing around 4 divines. Don't forget that on PoEbuilds.net you can find a list with all the equipment that you need to buy for this build, with direct links for examples being sold by other players. You only need one mandatory unique item for this build, the Profane Proxy Ring that causes one of your Skitter bots to have a curse aura. This way, the enemies you hit with your Hex Blast are always going to trigger the big area damage, increasing a lot your clear speed. For clear speed, I'll give this build 9 out of 10. You are very fast and your mines explode in a big area, killing many monsters at once. It's very comfortable to clear maps with this character. The boss damage is also amazing and deserves 9 out of 10. You can stack many mines and delete bosses with a huge detonation. This build has an incredible single target potential, even on a low budget. For the survivability, I'll give it 8 out of 10. Even though you have armor, evasion, spell suppression and can throw your mines from a big distance, this build is still not very tanky and needs to stay still from time to time to deploy the mines. That's why I took 2 points out. Next, on 11th place, we have the classic Toxic Rain Pathfinder with the Ranger class. This build uses the permafrost and chaos damage of Pathfinder to deploy many powerful pods that drain the life out of your enemies. To list the pros of this build, I would start with how easy it is to put together. You don't need any mandatory unique item and the leveling is very simple. Another great feature of this build is that your flasks are going to stay up all the time, even on boss fights, and the life regeneration from your life flask will be eternal, making the damage over time look like a joke to you. This build is great for beginners because you end up having great clear, boss damage and survivability with low investment. Now to list the cons, the main issue of this build is mana. Since we're dealing with a damage over time build, we cannot reach mana or life. Because of that issue, we need rare rings that reduce the mana cost of skills. As for budget, you can get it destroying early endgame maps with only around 100 chaos. To comfortably advance to yellow maps, you need to invest around 150 chaos, and for easily completing your atlas, I recommend investing around 4 divines, where you can totally do it with less. For clear speed, this build gets 9 out of 10. As a Pathfinder, your Quicksilver and Silver flasks are going to have more effect and be up 100% of the time, granting a lot of attack and movement speed. Also, you only need to deploy the pods once and they will drain surrounding enemies, granting a smooth gameplay. The boss damage also gets 9 out of 10. Combining your strength with Toxic Rain totems, bosses just drawing countless pods. Even the big bosses are going to melt like butter before your eyes. For this survivability, I'll give it 9 out of 10. This is because this build has high evasion, high armor and spell suppression. Also, your defensive flasks have more effect and are up all the time, even on bosses. Above all, you can use Toxic Rain from a safe distance and its spots heavily slow down enemies. Finally, on 10th place we have the amazingly well-rounded Nightblade Flicker Strike Raider with the Ranger class. This is the kind of build where you can have it all. It easily achieves over 10 million DPS, it's super tanky, and as you can see on the gameplay, incredibly fast. To list the pros of this build, I have to pretty much repeat what I just said. This is one of the most well-balanced builds I've ever played. It has super speed, damage and survivability. It also has a satisfying gameplay with explosions, and let's face it, Flicker Strike is just super cool. Now to list the cons, I'll start saying that this build isn't cheap. You need some mandatory unique and rare items that will exceed the divine price. Another issue is that you have little control over your character. This might be a problem on bosses like Queen Atziri and the Shaper, where you need to know which clone to attack and mind your position. Getting to the budget, this build is expensive and not a starter. You need at least 6 divine orbs to put it together. You need 3 mandatory unique items for this build. The first is the Farus Fur Body Armor, which guarantees that you always have your full frenzy charges on. Next, we also need the Yoke of Suffering Amulet that causes all of our elemental damage to be able to shock enemies, causing them to take a lot more damage. Finally, we also need the Perseverance Bell that turns tankiness into damage. It does that, granting 1% increased damage for every 200 of the lowest between armor and evasion. Good thing that this build counts with over 30,000 of each. For clear speed, this build is surely a 10 out of 10. And I didn't even need to tell you that. Check out this gameplay, this is some serious anime swordsman stuff. The boss damage is also great, especially when you can use your Berserk skill. As you can see, it kills guardians in less than 2 seconds, but I will only give it 9 out of 10 because this damage is reduced on pinnacle bosses when it's harder to stack our rage. For the survivability, I'll also give it 9 out of 10. This build has almost 100,000 effective HP because of high armor, high evasion, spell suppression, over 30% chance to block and high chance to avoid elemental ailments. I just took 1 point out because you have low life regeneration, making it vulnerable to poison. And that's it for today, guys. Have you played any of those builds during this league? Please don't forget to share your experience in the comments and leave a thumbs up to support the channel. I wish you guys an amazing day, and don't forget to keep building!